It is a country few outsiders have ever visited or heard of, but tonight the Central African Republic stands in the glare of international attention as the United Nations warns of genocide and describes a descent into complete chaos. And that is a quote. The French have started deploying troops in the capital, Bangui, to respond to the deteriorating situation in which sectarian bands of machete-wielding Christian and Muslim mobs have hacked hundreds of people, men, women and children to death. Landlocked in the heart of Africa, the CAR is rich in minerals but surrounded by the unstable and failing states of Congo, Chad and Sudan. A coup in March, which overthrew the president, sparked what is now called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Nearly 500,000 people have been displaced by the violence and millions more are in need of food aid. Our chief news correspondent Alex Thompson is on the ground there and reports from Buea in the west of the Central African Republic.
Tomorrow the United Nations votes for what they pray here will be a robust peacekeeping force, more than urgently needed. In the capital Bangui, the existing French army presence is beefing up, but they'll need a lot more transport planes. The country's the size of France and descending rapidly into violent chaos. We flew west to Buea this morning. It seemed wise. Seleka gunmen killed 15 people on the road route just yesterday. As we land, soldiers from the puny African UN force stand guard. It's near silent, tense. These men say the Seleka engage them daily. Every plane needs security. Minutes later, sudden urgency. The Red Cross payload, 16 people with gunshot wounds, mostly women and children, like 3-year-old Petinu.
One girl lost her leg, the other one was shot in the chest and in the left leg. They've gone back for 4 weeks of rehabilitation and now we'll be following up to make sure that they're able to move on with their lives.
The casualties are taken to what passes for the hospital in Buea, and we learn more about little Petinu, shot through the buttocks in a firefight between the Seleka gunmen and opposing militia. Petinu's dad, Maturio Kombo, describes how his 3 other children were killed and his wife. Petinu, he says, is all I have left. On the bed next door, another unsmiling, traumatized child casualty. What does life hold in the Central African Republic for a little girl whose right arm has been shot off? For Leslie, everything about life has now changed. And you do not have to go far to see where the violence is happening. The village of Vakap, or what's left of it, is just a few miles north of Buea, cooking in a burned-out shell. Seleka gunmen heard a rumour that this was an opposition village. They came, looted, shot the place up, and burned much of it to the ground. Hundreds are still out there in the bush, they say, too terrified to come home. So what security do you have here now? Who can protect you?
Sécurité tient là qu'on a ningi ala qu'on a bien sécurité ça on va te protéger la guerre.
Jamais tu can yo quoi après. We can security après.
We don't have any security here.
No police, no army?
La police a d'appel ni armée a d'appel.
Je suis gapé si gia a Seleka ni awe la ga merde ko ndunia.
There is no police, no army. Only Selekas people that come here.
Every week, more and more villages like this are appearing across this country, and the United Nations is already speaking of the potential for a genocide here. If nothing is done, it seems pretty plain this country will become another disaster zone like Congo, like Sudan, or like Somalia. But on this occasion, for once, just possibly, the world has the chance to intervene if it takes decisive action and takes it fast. This week could mark the beginning of that decisive action, but how long until anyone on the ground here really feels any safer? Well, I'm joined now here in the Western Jungles in Buea, the Western Jungles of the Central African Republic, by the Chief Executive of Save the Children. You saw them in action in that piece just now, Justin Forsyth. Justin, first of all, I mean, you've come here to see what exactly is going on the ground. What have you made of it?
I've been shocked by what I've seen and heard. The little girl who had a arm amputated. A mum who I met who had to flee into the bush with her 4 children after watching her husband be shot. I mean, we've driven past ghost villages, all the people hidden in the bush. Hundreds of thousands of people are now displaced. Children are particularly vulnerable, and the world really just needs to act now.
And the world is just coming in terms of the humanitarian, in terms of people giving aid, basically, just off the whole of the Philippines thing that's happened. What do you say in the light of that when you're suddenly faced with something like this?
Well, firstly, we need the Security Council to give a mandate to a UN African force so that we have troops on the ground. Tomorrow, so we have troops on the ground, not just in the capital, but out here 9 hours away from the capital to protect these children. It's completely unacceptable that children are being shot, are being driven into the bush. These children are living out in the bush tonight, vulnerable, and they need the protection of the United Nations. That's what the United Nations is there for. We also need aid because we need to prop up the health system, which has completely collapsed. 70% of kids are also out of school.
Right, but Western intervention, we're living in the post-Iraq, the post-Afghanistan world. The United Nations doesn't have a great record in many senses over this. Can they do the job?
Well, this is a small country of 4.6 million people, and actually a small force could do a lot. And just a few troops on the ground, just here in this town already, are able to protect some children. So we had an enlarged force. It could do a lot to protect children. It's completely unacceptable, the situation we have, and this country is teetering on the brink, and we can help it pull back from the brink with a proper force.
But machete-wielding militiamen, gunmen, they operate in the cities. In fact, they'll be standing around in this town probably less than a mile from where you and I are now standing right now. Come an international force, they just get pushed into the bush, and no outside force can deal with this. It's a country the size of France.
But a UN force, I mean, we know from other conflicts in Central Africa, actually a relatively small force can do a lot. If we had actually had, in Rwanda's case, several thousand more troops, they could have saved a lot of lives. So actually, I think a moderately sized force with a proper mandate, properly financed, could make a big difference on the ground here. But we also need aid. We need aid to provide health, to provide education. These children are really suffering, and we need to act right now.
OK, well, you heard what Justin Forsyth of Save the Children says there, a chance to avoid another potential Rwanda here in the centre of Africa. For now, we hope to be back with more tomorrow night, but for now, back to you, Kathy, in London.
Thanks, Alex.